Hey, Tabitha Veazey, welcome to the Tech Bootcamp podcast.
Hello.
Well, we are really excited to have you, and more than excited to just have you, I'm excited not to have Matt Sabatello. I know sometimes we have to, get to addition by subtraction, and we subtracted Matt, and we have one of the nice North Americans from Canada, Lacey Anderson, co-hosting with me today. Hey, Lacey.
Hello. Nice to see you guys.
Thank you. So,
Yeah.
Tabitha, talk to us about currently where you are.
Well, I would say I'm more 95% compared to where I was in 2021, which was roughly probably 5%.
All right, so we're gonna have a story of a great deal of progress, but let's talk a little bit more generally about where you're calling in from. Meaning, what part of the world are you in right now?
I am originally from Mississippi, a small town called Pope, Mississippi, but I am now currently in Memphis, Tennessee. I've been here now for 5 years.
All right, Memphis, Tennessee, beautiful city. I was there recently. I shared with you offline, and I just loved Memphis, Tennessee. Tennessee is a cool place, so I'm sure you're enjoying all the culture and just the beautiful city that you have there in Memphis.
Of course, and go Grizzlies.
All right, yes. Well, Ja has been a little bit of a disappointment again this year, but I know that's a little painful for you folks in Memphis. You're a superstar basketball player, just keeps getting himself in trouble, and then he gets himself hurt.
Better luck next season.
Yes, better luck next year. Well, I have to tell you that for many years I felt your pain as a New York Knicks fan. I had a horrible like 3 decades of fandom, but now the Knicks are good and the Grizzlies suck. Sorry about that. So talk to us, Tabitha, about what you do in that beautiful city of Memphis, Tennessee.
I am a contract specialist for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So any project along the Mississippi River from St. Paul, Minnesota, all the way down to New Orleans, I help assist on those contracts.
Oh, that's really cool. And it's really exciting. So thank you for doing that cool work.
You're welcome.
So give us a little bit more about your background. So you said you grew up in Mississippi. What was it like to grow up in Mississippi, and what were your dreams and goals as a child growing up in that region?
Yeah, so I am a country girl, born and raised, like I mentioned, a small town called Pope. My dad has a farm, still has a farm, so I'm used to the outdoor life. But I grew up actually modeling and in beauty pageants, surprisingly. I did a lot of that until I was 16 years old. And then I changed over to more wanting to go to college. My first dream was to move to New York, become a model and all of that. And I wish social media was big back then. Maybe I have a better chance at it. But unfortunately, those dreams didn't come true. So I ended up going to college. I went to Delta State University, which is in Cleveland, Mississippi, where I majored in marketing. And I left there and I moved to the coast of Mississippi. I lived there for roughly 5 years. Then I moved back home and I started working for the city of Memphis. I've been in government now for the past roughly a little bit over 10 years. And that's something that I love to do. I love working with people, and just working with the federal government in general has been very beneficial for me and my career and my life as well, as far as a work-life balance. So it's been very beneficial for me the past 10 plus years, actually.
So this is an audio only podcast, so folks do not have the benefit of seeing you, but I will tell you, I was surprised to hear that you're a farm gal. I was not surprised to hear that you were a model. So let's talk about your life as a farmer, and your dad's life as a farmer, because we do know that many people who are farmers by profession suffer from Lyme disease. So talk to us about what it was like working on the farm.
Mhm.
If you did in fact work on the farm, I want you to build that out for us. But even if you didn't work on the farm, because your dad was outdoors all the time and your dad was coming into the house with whatever was on his clothing, were you tick aware during your childhood? And were you able to protect yourself if you were doing any work on the farm? And were you able to protect yourself if your dad brought anything in the house from the farm?
Yeah, so I wasn't very involved on the farm. My dad was of course more involved in the farm. What he would do whenever he goes out to the farm into his garden, he will always spray on bug spray. we would always, growing up, I was very aware of ticks. You know, we would pull them off all the time. I grew up in the country. We played outside. We were always in the woods. We were always just doing things outside. We didn't play inside. There were no computers, no iPads, none of that. So I was always outside playing. And never even put on bug spray. My dad, of course, did all the time because he spent a lot of time in the garden. But me, myself, never did any of that. Always pulling off ticks, never got sick, none of that. So when I did, of course, get sick in 2021, it was a surprise because I'm thinking like, well, I've been bit by ticks all my life. So why all of a sudden am I getting sick? So it's been very long journey, being that I grew up around ticks all my life. So becoming sick from one bite has really, really been challenging.
Well, we're going to talk about that, Tabitha, because I'm not sure you got sick from one bite, but we'll pause there for a second, and we'll use that as some foreshadowing for our later conversation. So you did outline for us, this educational path and this career path that you were on, and what your dreams were, to be an entertainer for a window of your life, and then ultimately you moved into government service.
Right.
Give us an outline of where you were in your life's path when you suffered the tick bite when you were 32 years old.
Yeah, so I was actually in grad school working on my master's degree when I realized that I had Lyme disease. So, suffering from Lyme disease, as well as attending grad school and graduating in the same year, was a challenge. So, during that time period, I was actually a grad student.
Okay. So now you indicated a moment ago that you were bitten by a tick when you were 32, right? So you're in grad school, you're 32 years old. Were you also working, or were you a full-time student at that time?
I was a full-time student and working at the same time.
Okay, so what type of work were you doing at that time?
At that time, I was in local government with the city of Memphis.
Okay. So give me some sense of what you were doing around the time that you found this tick biting you when you were 32.
Yeah, so I remember the day. It was July the 5th, 2021. On the 4th of July, my family, that weekend, we always barbecue outside, enjoy each other, family time. So I was coming back home July the 5th after the 4th, and my back was itching. I was like, why am I itching on my back? So I looked in the mirror. I was like, can't be. Is this a tick? So I panicked. So I called my mom and said, hey, there's a tick on my back. Why do I have a tick on my back? And instead of me grabbing my tweezers, which I wish I should have, I panicked and I kind of like scratched and pulled it off. And when I did, of course, there was like blood and everything. I'm like, oh my God, like there's actually a tick on me. So when I kind of scratched him off, I didn't find him. So I was like, I don't know what I did with him. But as soon as I did that, I was panicking. I was like, I've never had a tick. Where does this tick come from? But that's what happened on that day when I pulled it off.
Okay, so what did you pull the tick off while you were driving back, after you had
Oh, I was
arrived
actually
back?
at home. I was at home. I actually just got out of the shower when I arrived home from my parents. I just got out of the shower, and that's when I was like, "What's itching on my back?" And that's when I pulled them off.
Okay. So is it your suspicion that that tick was feeding on you for at least a day before you discovered and pulled it off, or was it perhaps even a longer period of time?
I think it may have been a longer period of time. The reason why was because the week before, my family and we went to Arkansas. We went on this nature trail, and I was thinking, well, maybe that's where I got it because I don't recall doing anything else outdoors instead of outdoors besides going to Arkansas on that nature trail. So I think it was there for at least probably about 4 or 5 days.
Okay.
Wow.
So now, after you remove this tick, I mean, you did share with us that you grew up in in a tick endemic environment. You grew up on a farm, so you were tick aware. You would check yourself, remove ticks. This is something that, was a part of your culture, your childhood culture. By the way,
Right.
very much like mine. When you pulled that tick off, did you save it and have it tested?
No, because like I mentioned, growing up, that's just something that always been, being bit by ticks, nothing ever happened afterwards. So I was like, okay, I pulled them off, let me put a band-aid there because of course it was bleeding, put a band-aid there and just go on about my night.
Right. So, one of the things that's interesting about your story, again, very similar to the experiences that I had growing up being bitten by ticks, is, although I was tick aware and although I knew how to remove a tick, I really didn't know what to do when I was bitten by a tick, right? I didn't know to save the tick. I didn't know to have it tested. I quite frankly didn't even know that I should go to a doctor to have a conversation about perhaps using antibiotics or some other tools to prophylactically protect myself from getting sick. So, so you like me, you didn't know to save the tick, and like me, you didn't know to go to the doctor, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay. So now talk to us about what was going on in your life at that time, because it seems to me that you were burning the candle on both ends. You were a full-time employee, you were a
Mhm.
full-time student, and I'm assuming you also had other social obligations. So give us some sense about what your life was like. And am I right in coming to this assumption that you were burning the candle at both ends?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, going to school and working for city government, I did a lot of community workshops. I worked as a small business representative, so a lot of my work involved just going to different town hall meetings, as well as hosting workshops at my job as well. So that involved me communicating with a lot of people daily, face-to-face meetings, developing those workshops weekly. So I spent a lot of time meeting a lot of people, and in that period, that's where I was at, as well as like I mentioned, going to school as well. So I was very, very busy, very social, just enjoying my life. I'm about to graduate grad school, which means there's going to be a promotion. So very looking forward to that. So it was a very exciting time in my life.
Okay. Now talk to us about the house that you were living in. Was it an apartment? Was it a house that you owned? I mean, where were you living?
Living in an apartment, which I still reside in that apartment.
Okay. And do you think at that time there were any issues with mold in your apartment?
I don't think so. And the reason why I say that is because these are fairly new apartments, and I am actually the first and only person in my unit. So I really doubt there was any mold. So I can say no, being that it's fairly new.
What about where you were working or where you were going to school? Do you think there was any mold in either your work environment or your educational environment?
In my work environment, possibly. And the reason why I say that is because the City Hall building is a very, very old building. It's been there for a long time, since the 1960s, and they are just now doing upgrades. So, probably so with my work environment. Now, with my school environment, of course, this is 2021, so everything was virtual. So, I really wasn't in a school environment during that time.
All right, but that was COVID, right?
Right, right. This is during the pandemic.
All right. So, and how are you emotionally dealing with all of the COVID restrictions and everything? I mean, were you being bothered by that, or were you you know, just sort of, the unique person in the world that wasn't really feeling overwhelmed by all of the COVID restrictions?
Well, in the spring of 2021, around March, I got COVID. So that was very scary because, they told us to make sure that we're not around anybody once we have it. And I'm an hour away from my family. So when I did get it, I was paranoid. I didn't, you watch the news and say, well, people are passing away, this and that. So for the 7 days, I was paranoid, didn't know what to expect because it's fairly new. So I had COVID during March of 2021. It really wasn't bad on me. Most of my symptoms were kind of like sinus pressure, headache, loss of taste and smell. That's about it. And I was well within 5 days. So after COVID, that's when I went and got my COVID shots, which was in April, late April of 2021.
Okay. So now you suffer this tick bite. Tick is feeding on you for a few days. You're burning the candle at both ends. You're a high achiever. You're dealing with the pressures of COVID. You're dealing with the pressures of having COVID yourself, not just the COVID culture. Um, and now you find this tick on your back and you pull it off.
Right.
What happens with your health?
5 days later, I went to visit my family. In the middle of the night, it had to be like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. muscle spasms like crazy, came out of nowhere. So I got up and I went to my parents and was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I can barely move. I could barely sit up. And they was like, well, what's wrong? I said, I don't know what's happening. I was like, I need to go to the hospital. It's like, they were like, we'll just take some Tylenols and lay down. You should be okay. So frustrated, I went, listened to my parents, took some Tylenols, and I went to sleep. The next morning, I drove back home and I got on my phone and I was like, where are these muscle spasms coming from? What did I do? I didn't work out that week. So I was like, can't be anything related to working out. And I was thinking maybe it was COVID related. So what I did, I went to Google and I searched muscle spasms. Then I thought to myself, well, maybe it's related to that tick bite. So I went to Facebook and I typed in Lyme disease. And some of the symptoms that pulled up, people were posting about their Lyme disease symptoms, and it was muscle spasm that was listed. I was like, what is Lyme disease? So I Googled Lyme disease, and that's where I found out what Lyme disease was. No idea about Lyme disease until 2021. After I Googled it, I called my doctor and I asked him, can you do testing, a Lyme disease test? And he was like, sure, you can come in next week. I'll be free. I was like, great. Set an appointment for the following week. And when I went in, he was like, you don't show symptoms of Lyme disease. And I was like, well, what are the symptoms of Lyme disease? He was like, well, normally when people come here, they're weak. They can barely talk. And I was like, well, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I went to Google and they told me this. And he was like, well, I can't do any testing. And I was like, well, can you, refer me to anyone in the area that does it? He was like, I don't know anyone that does that. So I'm frustrated. It's like, you're the doctor. You have all the answers. You should at least. So somebody has to help me. And he was like, well, I really don't know what to do or say. What I could do is maybe call around, but I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately, because I really don't think you have Lyme disease. I've had other patients come in here and their symptoms were different from what you're telling me. You're telling me you only have muscle spasms. It could be just something else. So I'm frustrated at this point. So I go back to Facebook and I found this Lyme disease support group and I typed in everything that was happening to me. And I told them about my experience at the doctor. And I was like, well, you should consider a Lyme literate doctor. I was like, okay, what's a Lyme literate doctor? And he's like, well, doctor, of course, that's Lyme literate. I was like, okay, cool. Where can I find him or her? So they sent me this link. It was a lady in the group, and I love this support group on Facebook. They're like my family. Been my family for the past 3-4 years. Well, 3 years. And they sent me the link, and it was one doctor in my area. His name is Dr. Timothy Callaghan. He's in Tunica, Mississippi. And I called him and set up an appointment with him. He did not have any openings until like maybe 2 months out, but he was willing to help. So I set that appointment, but I still want to know what was happening to me. So I went around to different urgent care centers and see what they test me. Many of them didn't have the testing. So I went to one here in Cordova, Tennessee, which is outside the Memphis area in the suburbs. And this nice doctor, she was like, yes, we can do testing for it. We'll see if you have Lyme disease. And I was like, cool, great. And when I got the results, it was maybe a week later, but she told me, she was like, normally people don't have symptoms until a certain period of time. And you're showing symptoms pretty quick. And I was like, yeah, but I want to know what's going on with me because I've never been this sick before. I mean, having muscle spasm and things. I don't know what's going on with my body. She was like, we can still test for you. And when I got the results back, it showed the Lyme test was positive. So I don't know what to do. So she said, come in and we're going to prescribe an antibiotic, which is one antibiotic, which is doxycycline. So I took that, which was just one doxycycline. I was thinking to myself, there has to be more. So when I went to my appointment 2 months later with Dr. Timothy Callaghan, he did another testing for me. And during that time, he showed different methods that I could go, which was the antibiotic route or the herbal routes. And I didn't know anything about herbs, so I was kind of scared to do the herbs. And he mentioned that I can take antibiotics for a month, which was doxycycline for a month, and take a lot of probiotics. So he's prescribed me with doxycycline for a month. he made sure, he told me to make sure I take a lot of probiotics as well. So I did that. He did extra testing on me, of course, just to confirm that I did have Lyme, which was positive. So I did my antibiotics for a month. And during that time was the worst time of my life because I
Okay.
had, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let's pause there. Let's pause there
I'm
because there's a
sorry.
lot I need to go over with you before Lacey takes you through your
I'm
treatment.
sorry.
All right. No, this is fantastic. You're a very articulate young woman and you tell a great story, but I have a lot of questions about the earlier part of your story before Lacey takes you through your treatment. So let's first talk about the tick bite.
Mhm.
Now, do you believe that you suffered your Lyme disease that was diagnosed through two different tests as a result of that one tick bite?
Um, Now when I think about it, no.
Okay. So tell me why you think that was not the case. And let me give you a little bit more background on why I was asking you some of the questions I was asking you before.
Okay.
Most of the experts who study Lyme disease take the position that it's very rare that you go from tick bite to chronic illness. Um, there are some circumstances where that will happen, and one circumstance where that will happen is if you have a compromised immune system. For example, if you're living in a moldy environment or you're coming in contact with some immunosuppressive experiences, burning the candle at both ends and really, really exhausted, and and that could be a profile that you fit into, Tabitha. Or if you suffer multiple tick bites,
Mm,
then in those cases where you have all of these tick bites and all of these microbes overwhelming your immune system, then you could get sick. But short of one of those two circumstances, in most cases, what happens with people who become chronically ill from Lyme disease is because what happens is their body loses the ability to manage the microbes that it had been managing for a long period of time, right? I mean,
mhm,
we almost all of us have the Lyme bacteria in our microbiome. It's something that our immune system is managing and can manage, and then it can't, right? So what I'm trying to get a sense of where you think you are, because as someone who had been bitten by ticks so many times during the course of their lives, there's no doubt in my mind, Tabitha, that your body was harboring and managing these microbes for many years, and then perhaps this tick bite was enough to overwhelm your system. Perhaps it was that in combination with you just living, a life where you were trying to get through school and work and illness and the crazy world that we were living at the time. And give me your sense of what combination you think ultimately caused your immune system to dysfunction or no longer function so they can manage these microbes.
What I think was COVID, as well as the booster shots and the stress of the pandemic, as well as full-time student and work. So I think all of that had a lot to do um, with my immune system at that time and the stress that caused all of that. So I think all those factors kind of had some type of input in that.
So let's explore the shots or the COVID shots, right? Because one of the things that we've seen many, many times on this podcast is we've had many young women who, right after taking immunization for one type of issue or another, would become chronically ill from Lyme disease. And one of the things that we think we've observed here on this podcast is that what's happening with some people who become chronically ill is their body was managing the bacteria or this combination of germs that ticks can spit into you or will spit into you.
Mhm.
And then what happens is they take a vaccine. Their immune system is now focusing on the microbes that were injected into them with the vaccine, and as a result, the rest of the microbes take off. Do you think that's a possible cause of your chronic illness?
I do. I think that was one of the causes for my illness at that time.
So how close was the tick bite that you had to the vaccines or the vaccine boosters you were taking?
Yeah, so my vaccine was in April, the end of April 2021, and the tick bite was July, the beginning of July, July the 5th. So
Okay,
not that far.
about 6 weeks. Yeah, about 6 weeks away. Okay, so now give me your reaction to your onboard diagnostic system telling you you have Lyme disease, right? You didn't really know what Lyme was. It
Right.
was something you had to research. But, you know, when you were getting sick and you were having these early symptoms, something told you you had Lyme disease. What was that? How did that come to your, you know, to your head? And what triggered you to start doing the research on Lyme?
As I mentioned, I've never had muscle spasms like that in my life, so I can only relate that back to the tick bite. So once I figured out, okay, muscle spasms, they're some of the symptoms of Lyme disease. That's when I started to go on Google and go on Facebook and social media and try to figure out anyone else that had Lyme disease was suffering from the same symptoms that I was suffering from. And that's when I found out some people were suffering from the same thing as far as those muscle spasms.
Oh,
Did I
hello?
lose?
I think we might have lost Rich there for a
Am I
little
still
bit.
here? Okay, okay.
I can hear you. We're still
I
here.
thought it was-
I'm sure Rich, I thought that was this not so subtle hint for me that I should be speaking. So, but hey, that's all good. So you, but
Okay, cool.
well, yeah, while we wait for Rich. Oh,
Sure.
we did lose Rich there, but I think you're the host now, it says for the computer. No, it's all good. So anyway, so you were saying that the essentially it was the muscle spasms themselves that for you, and you mentioned around the time of the COVID vaccine and such. And yeah, and it looks like Rich might be back now, but we could just
Okay.
carry on in the meantime.
Yeah, so I'm sorry,
There we
guys.
go. He's
I
back.
got lost. I got lost. My internet went down. So and I know Lacey's going to be taking over in 2 more seconds. So, but just, you know, one of the things that we always talk about here on this podcast is your onboard diagnostic system. And it sounds to me that, you know, when you finally started doing the research on Lyme disease, you knew you had Lyme, right?
Correct. Yes.
I mean, your gut was telling you you have Lyme disease.
Correct.
All right. So now you go to a doctor and you tell the doctor, hey, I believe I have Lyme disease, right?
Yes.
And I believe that I have Lyme disease in part because of the research I've done, and in part because my gut is telling me I have Lyme disease.
Correct.
So how do you think that doctor might have done a better job of utilizing your onboard diagnostic system and the information you are giving that doctor to help you come to a proper diagnosis? And why do you think that doctor didn't use that?
I believe, well, he was an older doctor, so I don't think he has been familiar with Lyme disease. Um, Lyme disease is really not, I guess you can say, prevalent here in Memphis. You don't hear about it that much. A lot of people that I've come in contact with through social media and just through different support groups are not from this area. So he did mention to me, he's like, well, Lyme disease is not, it's not in Memphis. It's more like on the East Coast. So how did you get Lyme disease? Are you sure you have Lyme? I was like, well, are you sure, doctor? Just because, it's prevalent on the East Coast doesn't mean we don't have it here in Memphis as well. I'm telling you my symptoms, and it's from a tick bite, which means that I have Lyme disease. So he was just using that and let me know it's not in this area. You don't have the symptoms. You don't look sick. He told me that as well. Most people that do have Lyme disease, they can barely walk, they can barely talk, and you look healthy. That's what he was telling me the entire time, which was really frustrating.
Yeah, it is. One of the things that we really enjoyed about interviewing, for example, Dr. Marty Ross, is that what Dr. Ross does is he uses his patient's gut and their feelings as a vehicle for helping them come to a proper diagnosis. But even more importantly, once they come to a diagnosis, whether it be clinical or through testing, but he also allows the patient to give input in their gut, to give input into what type of treatment they should be pursuing and in what order, right? That appears to be a very enlightened approach to defining, what the treatment plan should be and what the diagnosis should be. So I'm not asking you to react to, and you're being very kind, to your doctor being older or having this mindset that we don't have Lyme here, which we hear that everywhere, other than I guess in New York, one of the virtues of being in New York on the East Coast. I'm really asking you to react to the doctor's lack of rigor and lack of willing to take input from a very intelligent, very articulate, very firm young woman who's saying, "Hey, doctor, I have Lyme disease."
Right. And he's no longer my doctor now.
No shock.
Because after that, there were plenty of times I would go to him and for symptoms that I was having after my diagnosis, he would just not listen to me. So he was it's it's hard to say. I do think that it's because of his age and because he was just illiterate to the disease itself, and he didn't want to listen to a young woman like myself. And he was an older Black doctor, so me, I've always like, okay, I want a doctor that looks like me. Maybe they'll listen to me. Maybe they will understand where I'm coming from. And when he did not listen, it was kind of like, okay, you don't believe me, you don't trust me. A reason why I have you as my doctor in the first place was because I thought you would believe in me as a minority myself. So that kind of hurt me at that time, and I had to find a different doctor. So he just didn't believe me. He was just illiterate, and I hate that he did not believe another minority coming in and telling their sickness. And I believe a lot of other minorities that suffer from this Lyme disease are not being heard.
I believe you on that one 100%. Yeah. I believe you that they're probably not being heard. Can you hear me still okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, good. So it's like they're just doing some stuff in the background there. But so you said that doctor, as we call it, you fired that doctor. And you now have a doctor, like Dr. Timothy Callaghan.
Yes.
So I guess, so to fire that doctor, to just essentially stop going to him and say,
I did. I told him that I no longer, wanted to be a patient. And he wasn't really understanding. But after I told him, I found a new doctor, which was Dr. Timothy Callaghan, which is a holistic doctor. And he has been very helpful for the past 3 years.
Two things I want to explore with you, which is, you believe that if you went to a doctor who looked like you, that doctor was more likely to listen to you.
Correct.
And perhaps the error that you made is that you needed somebody who looked like you and your gender rather than in other ways. So give me your reaction to whether you think a female doctor might have been more willing to listen to the input that you were giving.
My new doctor now is, I have two doctors. So my functional doctor, my holistic doctor, which is Dr. Timothy Callaghan, which helps me with my Lyme disease. And I have a new doctor. Her name is Dr. Sai. She is, of course, from the Middle East. She's very helpful with my journey as well. She does listen. She's very patient with me. She's not really familiar with Lyme disease, but if I come in and say I am having this symptom, she would try to figure out, okay, what do you think we should do to help you become better? So I am very ecstatic about her. Now I know the importance of really just having not someone just to look like me, but more to have someone that will. I read her reviews basically, and all of the reviews said that she was very patient with her patients. She listened and she cared. So that was one of the things I was looking for with my new doctor. And I am very glad that I found her instead of my old doctor that doesn't listen and still doesn't listen.
Yeah, so that's really the key, though, Tabitha, right? I mean, it is, and I think your gut, quite frankly, was correct in thinking that someone who you could connect with
Right.
would be more likely to listen to you. But really, that's the goal. The goal is to get someone who's going to listen to you, right?
Right.
And if somebody's not listening to you, regardless of what they look like, then it's time for you to pivot to a new doctor, right? Because one of the things we've seen as a pattern on this podcast repeatedly is that in order to be able to get better, you have to have a pretty quick trigger and move on to another person, either because you've plateaued in the level of care that you're receiving from the person who you're working with, or because you have somebody who's not using the most valuable tool that's available to them, the words that are coming out of the patient's mouth, and what the patient is not just feeling, but what their onboard diagnostic system is telling them that the doctor really should be taking into account.
Correct. Correct.
So you moved on from this doctor because the doctor was simply not interested in listening to you, or another thing again, and it may not be, you know, another important lesson that I think we have to share with our listeners here is that our mindset is going to control our cognition, right? And part of the reason it's important for us to understand that is if we're working with doctors who have a mindset, or they're working with theories that are limiting their ability to see what they need to see to make us better, that's an important reason for us to move on. But it's also important to understand that our own mindset is going to place limits on what we're going to see. And because our own mindset is going to place limits on what we're going to see, we always have to be open to the possibility that maybe we need to work on our mindset so that we can progress with our treatment. Give me your reaction to those two thoughts.
So, can you ask that question one more time? I want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Yeah, so I want to talk about mindset, right? Because mindset is important not only from the standpoint of our ability to heal, right? Because if we do not believe we can get better, we're not going to get better.
Okay.
If we don't believe a treatment is going to work for us, the treatment is not going to work for us, right? So we always have to be aware of what our own mindset is, or what our own beliefs are, so that we can be successful in seeing what we need to see, and thinking what we need to think, and feeling what we need to feel, and taking the actions that we need to take in order to be able to be successful. But in addition to that, we also have to be aware of the mindset and the beliefs of the people that we're working with. Because if our doctors do not have a working belief system that allows them to, for example, believe that the input we're giving them is the most important information that they need to help us to be diagnosed. If they don't have a belief that there is Lyme disease in the community where we are working or living, you know, so we have to be aware of mindset from the standpoint of both the practitioners we're working with and from our own standpoint. So I'd like to get your feelings about your mindset and the mindset of the practitioners that you work with.
Yes. So, when I worked with Dr. Timothy Callaghan, when I first met him, the first thing he told me was, I don't have a magic wand. And when he told me that, I was like, what do you mean? Are you telling me that after I take these antibiotics?
I have one.
You do. Awesome.
I need that. And he mentioned, he was like, well, after the antibiotics, I asked, well, after antibiotics, will I be better? And he said, I can't promise you that. This is a journey. Everybody has a different journey. So we're going to tackle it one step by step and go from there. So I believed in him because he actually has Lyme disease as well. And during that time, it was challenging, but I still had him to call. And I relied on him because I trusted him because he went through the process as well. So my mindset was very positive when I was working with him compared to my previous primary physician.
Okay. So you've got the diagnosis now. In terms of the diagnosis itself, I know you said you were relatively new to the Lyme disease world.
Right.
Were you relieved that that's what it was? Or were you like, oh no?
Well, I was relieved to know what was happening to me. I was happy to know that, okay, I know what it is. I found a doctor now. Here's the treatment. So once I figured that out, I was like, okay, let's go. Let's get the treatment going. After the treatment, I should be good.
Okay. Yeah. And then, so in terms of the treatment itself, at one of the first couple of appointments, did you have sort of was it next month mapped out for you, or tell me a bit more about your treatment plan itself?
Yes.
Yeah, so us, not me.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So it
All
was
of us.
antibiotics that I had to take for a month. And that's all I had as far as a plan, because like I mentioned, he gave me two options. He was like, antibiotics or herbs. I wasn't familiar with herbs, so I was like, okay, let's do antibiotics. So as I was taking the antibiotics, I got worse. And I didn't realize why I was getting worse. So what I did, I went back to my lovely community on Facebook, my Lyme disease support group, and I was asking them, okay, I'm taking my antibiotics. why do I feel worse? And I was like, well, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But they mentioned a term called herxing. So I was like, well, what is that? And it was like, well, you're killing the bugs and they have to get out of your body. I was like, what do you mean? Like, they're like bugs inside of me? Like, what are you talking about? So a lot of them gave me different things to do to try to prevent those herxing symptoms because I literally felt as though I was dying. My heart rate was dropping. So when I was checking my heart rate, I was calling my doctor at the time, which was the same doctor that I had, tried to see if he could get me scheduled to a cardiologist because my heart rate wasn't the same. It was averaging roughly like 44, 40, 43 beats per minute. I was like, this is not normal. Like, healthy, I work out a lot, like why is my heart rate this low? So I went to a cardiologist as well while I was doing my antibiotics, and they mentioned, well, your heart is healthy, like why are you here? Like, you're healthy. So I'm like, no, this is not, I'm not healthy, I have Lyme disease. I was like, well, we're not familiar with Lyme disease. So after that visit, they did give me a heart monitor. And during that month, while I'm still taking my antibiotics, I had my heart monitor, as well as taking my antibiotics, still dealing with those herxing symptoms until one of my, I'm going to say friends, we can say friends now from the support group, mentioned an herb called Burbopanella. I can show it to you.
Yeah,
This
Berber
here.
Panella.
That has been my go-to since then. I took that while I was taking my antibiotics, and it helped tremendously, but I still felt bad because I still had a lot of the toxins built in during that entire month. And after I finished my antibiotics, I called my doctor, Dr. Timothy Callaghan, which is like I mentioned, my holistic doctor. And I told him, well, I'm done with my antibiotics. I really don't feel well still. He was like, well, herbs are going to probably be the best route. And he didn't want to allow me to take more antibiotics because they're bad for your gut health. So after that, I started taking my herbs, and they helped me. I took herbs for roughly maybe a year. I can show you my herbs. I have all my things here. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So,
No, you're ready.
Byron White herbs, if you can see that. A through L complex.
Okay.
These are $200 a bottle. And I have 3. And I have a Bart, because I have Bartonella as well. And I have a Myco from Mycoplasma.
Okay.
So unfortunately, insurance doesn't pay for that. So a lot of my herbs came out of pocket. So that's roughly $600 in herbs that I had to pay for. But they were very helpful during my journey. One of the things that I had to figure out was basically how to remove those toxins. I was killing the toxins, but removing those toxins and herxing symptoms made me feel worse. I was very tired all the time. As I mentioned, heart rate wasn't good. I bought a new Apple Watch during that time as well to check on my heart rate because I was very paranoid at this time as well. My heart rate is dropping a little by myself. I went to the hospital, the ER, roughly 3 times in the span of that year. And I remember the last time I went there and they saw me, I'm pretty sure they was like, why are you here? And I was like, you keep coming here and there's nothing wrong with you. So after a while, I stopped going. I just really told myself, I was like, you know what? You're going to, just fight this. Nothing has happened since. The cardiologist said your heart is great. You just have to fight it and just, keep taking your herbs and keep, removing those toxins with your different herbs that you're taking. So that journey was very, very stressful and very scary, to say the least.
Yeah, I could imagine. So essentially you came to a point where you decided, sort of, it's not worth it for me to continue going to the hospital anymore, is kind of what you're saying?
Exactly, because I was spending money at the ER as well. There's like $300 a visit going to the ER and them telling me there's nothing wrong with you. Why are you here? And they would run a blood test and everything's like, we can't find anything. It's like, we don't know what's wrong. Why you keep coming here? So eventually I told myself, like, just stop going. Just try to fight it yourself. And if anything happens, just let it happen. So I really just trust the process during that time. It was very, very stressful. I was very depressed during that time as well because no one really knew what I was going through. My parents didn't know because they never had Lyme disease. No one in my friends. I had no one to talk to besides my my group on Facebook. So
Yeah.
no one to pick up the phone and be like, hey, I'm having a bad day. I'm herxing or anything like that. So I had to really just fight it myself during that time.
Right, right. It sounds like you did take quite a bit into your own hands, which unfortunately a lot of people in the community have to do. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but
Sure.
I would like to let you know that I think I might know which Facebook group you're discussing.
Okay.
I might be in it perhaps, but just going back. So just to kind of let everybody know. So Lyme disease was positive. I think you mentioned mycoplasma as one of your treatments.
Yes. And
And did you Bartonella as well?
yes.
Okay, so any other ones positive for you?
No, just those.
Yeah, and I guess when we say just those are such a handful in themselves that like
Right.
one is enough. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to kind of clarify for everybody all your positive tests there. And then sort of going back, so it sounds like you came to a point, as you already mentioned, where you didn't really feel probably comfortable to keep going to the hospital. And then reaching out to the Facebook group. And somewhere in there, did you find something that was pretty helpful? I know you mentioned the Berber panella
Yeah.
for your Herxmeyer reactions.
Yes, the Berber panella, lemon water, a lot of lemon water, Epsom salt baths, very helpful, and the sauna. So going to the gym, just sitting in the sauna and sweating, that helped a lot as well. Removing sugar, removing alcohol. I miss alcohol. I miss my
Yeah.
glass of wine. So it about 3 years since I had a glass of wine. So
Wow.
did
Yeah.
that. So that was that was kind of, a point in my life where I was very social, to go to social networking events and having a drink, to not being able to do that anymore. But it was something that I had to do in order to heal my body. So I
Yeah.
got rid of all of that. Exercising, that helped a lot. I did a lot of exercising. Still do that now to this day. And a lot of vitamin C. I have a lot
Okay.
of vitamins. I have vitamin C, vitamin D, magnesium. That's all I take every day. So a lot of the vitamins have been helping me as well.
So you're all supplemented up.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So okay. So you've got your treatment plan. You've got sort of a month with the antibiotics, the Herxmeyer reactions, and in our community, we hear the Herxmeyer reactions themselves are and can be horrendous. I know you mentioned a bit like the depression sort of
Yeah.
came in there with that. Did you notice anything with your Herxmeyer reactions that affected like your mental clarity, like any flare-ups related to mental health at all, or no?
Not really. A lot of brain fog, which I wasn't familiar with until it actually happened. It really didn't affect my mental clarity, to say the least. During that fall, I graduated from grad school, so which I was in grad school. So during my treatment and the depths of my treatment, I finished grad school. So in 2022 is when I just started just getting really in depth in my herbs and taking that in my treatments. But it didn't affect my mental clarity. I did have a lot of brain fog though.
Okay, yeah. And so I will sort of, you mentioned that you were feeling, I guess I'll use the word isolation. You said you didn't really feel like you had someone to talk to regularly about this.
Correct.
So you mentioned just a little bit about, I think, the parents. So is that something that's within that they're willing to understand as a Lyme disease, or is that pretty new to them and not really their time frame, like their timeline?
Very new to them as well. I was frustrated during that time trying to educate them on it. I got to a point where when I would tell them I wasn't feeling well, it's kind of like, okay, you look good. What do you mean you don't feel well? To the point where I just didn't tell anybody I wasn't feeling well. I would just be around people and I would just feel terrible and not tell anyone about it because I didn't want to bother people with it because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to handle it. So I got to a point where whenever I felt sick, I didn't say anything. I just handled that on my own.
And how did you handle that on your own? Essentially, those kind of days. What got you through when you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, I can't really call my parents per se to talk to them about this. They might not understand. What does one do?
I did a lot of crying during that time, to be honest with you, because, like I mentioned, I had no one to talk to. So it was just me battling this disease by myself, and no one even talked to me about it. And what's crazy is when I went on the group, I'm pretty sure you're in this group as well. And I mentioned the importance of having people that look like me that went through the same struggles to, maybe help me. When I went on this group, I noticed that there was no one that looked like me in that group. And I was like, well, where are the minorities? Like, am I the only one? Like, who can I talk to that could help me along this journey that kind of understands where I'm coming from? Um, During that time, like I mentioned, I was working. I had a doctor, not a doctor, but a boss that was very understanding. So if I needed days off, I was able to stay home, get myself together, and I didn't have to be in the office. So during that time, that was very helpful. I really appreciate her for understanding. She didn't understand the disease itself, but she understood that I wasn't well. I lost a lot of weight during that time because I wasn't eating the way that I was before. I cut out a lot of food. I was depressed. I lost roughly 20 pounds. I went from 180 to 160. And a lot of people noticed. They was like, oh, that's a lot of weight. You've been exercising, working out. And I would respond, I was like, yes. I didn't tell people I was sick or anything. I was like, yes, I've been working out, things like that. Because I didn't want people to question it. Then I have to go through what it is and all of that. So I didn't tell a lot of people about it. Really, tonight, me discussing this with y'all was the first time me just basically getting my story out there.
That's amazing. Yeah. I'm glad that you are. I'm sure that lots of people will be wanting to hear what you have to say. So we're all glad that you are. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess kind of going along here with this, what you're telling us now. So I guess we'll quickly so you found support in the Facebook communities. That's something in my journey I also did as well. And even with my healthcare background, I actually, before I went to medical appointments, would get my questions answered by them so that I had a bit of an idea, and I'm well prepared going into my appointments. And then also kind of potentially saving myself some money along the way at the appointments if I already kind of know what direction that we might go. So I don't know how specific we could get about the Facebook group, but essentially it's a spot where you can post questions and members in the community can kind of give you their input.
Correct. So even when I'm not feeling good, I'll just post in the group, hey, I'm having a bad day. Then everybody's like, oh, you're good, do this and that. And I enjoy that, to have them there. I mean, they're like family. So they understand what I'm going through. If I'm having a bad day, if, I'm taking a new treatment, I can post it in the group and they'll be like, well, I've had that too. If you do this, you can do that. So it's been very helpful to have that support. And I appreciate that group so much. I make sure that I still kind of, because I feel a whole lot better than I was in 2021. But I still try to go into the group and help others because I know a lot of people join that group daily that are fairly new to the disease. So I make sure to always go in there and assist others with the process as well.
Right. Rich, are we able to state a Facebook group? Yep. Okay, I'll allow you, and then we'll see if my hypothesis was correct, if it's the same one I'm in or not.
Let me pull it up. I want to make sure I have the correct name here. I'm going to show it to you. It is Lyme Disease Support and Wellness, and it says Lyme Disease Bring It Out of the Darkness. It has 50,000 members.
Okay, yeah. It sounds familiar to me as well. Yep. Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you're able to find that bit of support in it, in a world that sometimes is not aware and supporting and sometimes invalidating, as I'm sure that you've found that multiple times.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned you had graduated somewhere along this timeline. So you'd graduated, and kind of take us a little bit from there. What was next for you?
So, after I graduated, I was looking forward to being promoted. That didn't happen. So I looked for a new job during that time as well. In 2023, this is like 2 years within my treatment, I got sick again, with C. diff. So I went from Lyme disease, now C. diff. And it was from basically my gut health was terrible. And after I had C. diff, I had H. pylori immediately afterwards. So I'm trying to find a new career and I get sick again. I'm like, where did this come from? How do I get C. diff? How do I get what is H. pylori? So during that time, I was battling the summer of last year. I was battling C. diff, and months later, 2 months later, I immediately had H. pylori, and I had to take more antibiotics. That treatment for H. pylori was probably worse than my Lyme disease treatment because it was a stronger antibiotic that I had to take, as well as other medication. And luckily, that antibiotic that I was taking for H. pylori helped with my Lyme disease as well. So that treatment was very helpful for my Lyme disease because after I did that treatment, I felt 10 times better as far as my Lyme disease symptoms. So my career didn't really take off until after I completed that treatment. In the winter of last year, I applied for a position with the federal government, which I was applying for years because I was trying to go from local government to federal government. But once I got sick during the time of the summer last year, I was like, well, I can't really even do anything right now because I have to get over this disease. And what's crazy was I was also dating during that time as well. I didn't date when I first got diagnosed with this disease because there was always these comments from people saying, well, if you date, if you kiss people, they're going to get it and all of that. And I was like, I didn't want anyone else to suffer from this disease. So I stayed away from dating until last year. But when I got sick, the person I was dating was not supportive at all. So I went from being sick to dating and having a partner that wasn't supportive to trying to find a new career. And luckily, after I went through that journey in my life, winter of last year, I applied for a new job with the federal government, which I'm currently with now.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you've got that position now, which is a very huge feat because you're still essentially on your healing journey. So
Exactly.
yeah, very big congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And so yeah, I'll just kind of I like to keep saying I'm jumping back, so I'm gonna keep jumping back here. So you mentioned C. diff, H. pylori, and so yeah, for those who are not familiar with it, digestive symptoms, and even without Lyme disease, sometimes it can be a persistent thing in itself and takes a lot of your immune system out with it because of the location and many other reasons. So I could imagine that would be a hurdle for you. Going past there, the antibiotics as well. And you said that did help with your Lyme disease. So how much would you say that kind of bumped you forward in your healing journey?
After my H. pylori, I felt 100 times better. I went from feeling sluggish, feeling down, to where I'm at now, which is I feel like 100%. I'm now able to have a glass of champagne, just one glass of champagne a month.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to overdo it because I don't want to, backtrack and put myself back to where I was in 2021. But I'm 100 times better. I take a lot of probiotics. I had to really build my gut health. I had to really do a lot of research on gut health because my gut was destroyed from all the antibiotics and everything that I was taking throughout the years. My gut health was destroyed. So not a lot of antibiotics, but a lot of probiotics, a lot of research on probiotics. I didn't know there were millions of different types of probiotics out there until I started to take them. So basically restoring my gut health has helped a lot with my Lyme disease. And I didn't realize the significance with gut health with just my overall health. I didn't know that if your gut wasn't good, you're not good. So basically restoring that gut health was very, very vital for me in my progress.
Right. Yeah. And that definitely makes sense because too much to even list is within the gut, the immune system, it has relations to mood, everything.
Exactly.
So yeah, it makes sense. So essentially you're learning in a way doing your own research on gut health as well as gaining information from your practitioners. You've now found what works for you in terms of those practitioners. You're graduating, you're working. So you're still got a pretty full plate in there. And how would you say that you're able to kind of juggle all of those things? Or did you have to kind of take some little timeouts from it and say, I might be a little too much that I can handle for right now?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I didn't date during that time. I stopped dating for a long time. The last partner that I had last summer, they really didn't understand what I was going through. After that, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take time for myself until I can really give myself fully to someone, because I was really scared to share my story. I didn't know how people would take it if I said, hey, I have Lyme disease, because people are not aware of what it is. I didn't know if it was going to scare anybody away, or I didn't even know if it's contagious. I still don't even know if it's contagious or not, to be honest with you. So
we will say we've talked a little bit about it on a different podcast. I don't have my own interview number memorized, but I'm sure that we can eventually pull that up for you. So we delve a little bit into that because, as you know, there are lots of myths, lots of fears. So it originates from a good place where research has started on the topic. However, exactly kind of what you're saying is people go out there, they don't really know, and the research is still in progress, essentially.
Right.
So so there we do talk a little bit on episode 382.
Okay.
So that was where Matt and Rich actually interviewed myself with my STI background as part of my kind of specialty of work. And so yeah, basically I don't know if I can spoil the whole outcome. Can I spoil?
Yeah, no, I think we should talk about it because it's
Rich wants me to spoil, so I'll spoil.
And not so much a spoil, but I think when we come to a particular topic area that's going to be significant to the folks who are listening to this podcast, we certainly want to highlight that they can listen to episode 382 and get some more insight for a more detailed conversation. But I also think it's important that we don't just sort of leave the question out there, because one of the things that Tabitha was concerned about is whether or not intimate contact such as kissing could result in Lyme disease being transmitted. And the answer is clearly no. We do know that kissing is not going to transmit Lyme disease. And Lacey, so why don't you give a little bit more detail, because you are certainly the person with a great deal of expertise in this area, so that folks understand, both from a physical standpoint and from an emotional standpoint, the importance of having intimate contact and intimate relationships, right? Because we don't want to be isolated, not only because people don't understand us, but also be isolated because we feel like we can't be in healthy physical contact with other people.
Right. Yeah. So I'm still on social media actually seeing a little bit of misinformation about this. Mm-hmm. But I know my time right now is not to kind of let each one individually know. I can't do that. It's sort of to eventually assemble a bit of a broader package on it for people. So essentially, as Rich said, I agree fully that no, Lyme disease, we don't have information on it saying it's transmitted by kissing. So that one can be put to rest for you. Probably, to be honest, people probably query different things that are sexually transmitted by mouth, and they sort of apply that concept to, if it is sexually transmitted, well, it must be by mouth too, because other things can be transferred to mouth, which we won't go into. So essentially, there's been some research starting where they've done some sampling on people with their partners. One person initially tests positive with Lyme, and then they sort of, very small sample sizes. So in this scheme of science, we'd ideally like to do way more of these and larger numbers of these. That's the nature of science, and that's what makes it essentially legitimate, and we can kind of fall back on it. So it's very good. It started these queries that potentially Lyme disease can be sexually transmitted. But when we sort of go past the next phases of this research, we come to these sort of gray areas that they can't quite really be answered yet. So for most of us can probably agree, we'd want this to get to medical world so that they can use it when people come to see them, right? So ideally we'd want to know yes or no, is it transmissible? But the reality is right now, the research is not there for either, but the research is there for a query that it can be passed sexually to a partner. Mm-hmm. So that then puts us into this whole other scheme of unanswered questions. Like, is it all strains? Is it when it's treated, untreated? And we certainly do not have that yet. So with these ideas of kind of minimizing harm to people, some practitioners are starting to say, that it is. So take precautions or abstain. But then it sort of comes into this emotional and lifelong practices that these statements are affecting for people. So we have to be really, really careful, the ones in the background of this information coming out, sort of how we share it and what comments we're sharing it with. Because there's definitely evidence for a strong query, absolutely. But we have to then wait for some evidence, because there's been animal models where they've tested the transmission and it hasn't necessarily passed with similar reproductive tracks to humans. And we've gone off animals sometimes in the past for other cases. And then the other big point brought up is that it's found in genital secretions. But there's also a lot of other things that are found in genital secretions that are not considered sexually transmitted, for example. So this is the one that's just in my back pocket. Usually I say COVID is actually found in genital and other secretions of the bodies too, along with some other viruses. But those ones are not necessarily considered sexually transmitted because of the fact that those areas harbor a whole lot of things, a whole lot of bacteria, not necessarily all of them are sexually transmitted. So sort of from the public health model of it, where people are going is to say, hey, I want to protect my patients. So it's from a good place. I want to protect them from this. But you have to sometimes trust that the people receiving the information are able to receive it in its entirety, and the wording is super important. So if I say to you, Tabitha, like Lyme is sexually transmitted, what are you going to think if I tell you that?
Well, right now,
just excluding what I just told you, actually. Rewinding to my spiel.
Well, if you told me that if you tell me now that it is sexually transmitted, myself, I'm going to go back to, well, that just puts me in a place where I can't date and I can't have children, and I don't have any children.
Right. So that's a really big, like biosocial, emotional outcome of how we word things. So if I say to you, now I say this to you, there's a very strong query emerging in the medical fields. There has been some research studies done where they found it in genital fluids, for example. However, there's these things also found in genital fluids, and there's a couple of animal theories that are sort of contesting the human theories. There's also some cases where partners are not necessarily testing positive for it of the initial person that was positive. So we have to be able to explain that before we are giving the communities in sexual health in general really concrete statements about it. So wording it's annoying, but wording is very important in this. And when we're sharing, and I hope that sort of people almost just maybe put the brakes on sharing those really concrete. And a little bit in the podcast with Rich and Matt, they talk about I lost my train of thought. Maybe Rich.
But let me pitch in a little bit, right? So we talk about here at Tick Bootcamp, we talk about upstream and downstream impacts of Lyme disease, right? We know that if you get bitten by a tick, that's the way that it's most likely going to be transmitted. And part of the reason why it is so likely to be transmissible from a tick bite, or as Dr. Bill Rawls talks about, that's the preferred method of transmission for the microbe, is because we have a tick that will be attached for a long period of time, and there's a lot of exchange of fluids between the host and the tick, and that has an impact on not only the way that the bacteria is transmitted, but also the speed at which the bacteria actually behaves once it ultimately injected, right? It also, the volume of the bacteria is greater when there's tick attachment. And there are a number of different immunosuppressive properties of the tick spit that also makes it more likely that the host is going to become sick when the bacteria is transmitted, right? So a tick bite is certainly as Dr. Rawls would say, the preferred method of transmission, and it's the way that most people ultimately get sick, as you did in your case. Now, there's a lot of research which is beginning to emerge that's demonstrating that there are downstream effects, right? And one of the downstream effects you've already identified, which is, can it be passed from mother to child? And the answer to that is yes, right? But that doesn't mean you can't have children, and it doesn't mean you can't have healthy children. It just means you have to be aware of it, and you have to work with Lyme literate obstetricians and pediatricians and gynecologists, and work with other people in the community who have gone through this journey. And there are a number of them that have been on this podcast as young women who are now the parents of healthy children.
Okay.
So it is something you should be aware of. It's something you should be taking precautions about. And now it's the same thing with sexual transmission. There's research that's showing that both partners will have Lyme disease in their semen and in their vaginal secretions. But at the same time, there are some experts, like, for example, Dr. Brian Fallon out of Columbia University, who's arguing the reason you're finding two partners that have Lyme disease is because they're living in tick endemic communities, are getting bitten, and they both have it. It's not necessarily transmitted from one person to another, but there are some animal studies, and Dr. McDonald talks about the dog studies where there seems to be some evidence that there is sexual transmissions. So does that mean you shouldn't have a relationship, Tabitha? Does it mean that you shouldn't have intimate contact with people? No, the answer is no. You should just engage in safe practices and have the conversation with your partner. And when you and your partner are engaging in intimate contact with one another, just be careful about how you do it, because remember, it's always going to be the bloodstream that we have to be the most concerned about. And if you're engaging in safe practices where there's not an exchange of blood, then maybe I think you're more likely to be safe. But you certainly should be engaging in healthy sexual contact with partners. You just want to make sure you're conscious of it. Now, the other thing we talk about downstream here in Tick Boot Camp is, of course, is blood transfusions, right? And there are certainly many microbes that are being transferred from people who have Lyme disease to others when they're being kind and they're being willing to donate blood, right? And so we have to be concerned about these downstream impacts, and this awareness allows us to take precautions. So I think Lacey did a brilliant job of saying, look, there are a lot of open questions that have not been answered. There's a lot of research that needs to be done, and we in the community have to encourage that research to be done. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean we shouldn't have boyfriends and girlfriends and intimate partners. It doesn't mean we shouldn't believe that we can't be, mothers and fathers. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be giving blood, and we shouldn't be, receiving blood transfusions if that's an important part of saving our lives. It just means that this awareness allows us to do all of those things in a way that would allow us to substantially reduce the likelihood of transmission downstream. At the same time, when we're tick aware and we are aware of the precautions we can take, we don't get sick like you did when we get a tick bite, right? So I certainly want our listeners, and I want you to understand that you should have intimate relationships. You should believe that you can have children, and you should believe that you can do that in a healthy way that's not going to make your children sick or your partner sick.
Right. I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's a heated topic usually to bring up. So it's actually really helpful that you brought it up.
Yes.
And Rich kind of summarized it super well. In that, it ultimately just comes down to, knowing that there is research emerging on it, and then kind of trusting that the Lyme community is able to take that true information and then understand that you can take precautions even just with that amount of information itself, that there's a query. And some people might say 100%, yep, going to be use protection, do this, abstain if I'm not treated, and things like that. So relationships are very doable. And I myself have had those kind of at initially what feel like awkward conversations with my now current partner too. It's once you kind of hear that, probably hopefully helps to give you some context and confidence if you are going to communicate with partners about it going forward. And that, we're not saying that it's not, but that it's a strong query at this point in time.
Yeah. I think it's important for us also to recognize that, at least in our experience here at Tick Boot Camp, the first question that most young women ask after they receive their Lyme diagnosis is, can I have a child?
Right.
Right? It's the first question everybody asks, right? So we do have to have these conversations, and we do have to make sure that we're not scaring ourselves into believing that this important part of the human experience is now going to be taken away from us. It's not. It's not, and it doesn't have to be. And look, we are as humans always picking up bugs. It's a part of the human experience. We are as humans going to exchange those bugs with our intimate partners. That's happening all the time, and we shouldn't just focus on one microbe or one set of microbes. It's just a part of the human experience, and our immune system, when healthy, can manage all of these things, right? So, please, 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 folks, don't believe that this is an end of that very important part of our lives where we can have intimate contact with other people, we can be in deep meaningful relationships with other people, and we can be parents. We can.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. So you mentioned I'm not going back, because like every time I start talking, say I'm going to jump back. I'm going to plow ahead right now. Tabitha, how do you feel about that?
Let's go ahead.
Okay, let's plow here. Okay, so now you said I think in the notes it said about 88% healed, but do you feel a little bit further along in your healing journey than 88%?
Oh yes, most definitely. I'm pretty close to 100% right now, and I feel good. I feel like I did before. Well, I take that back. No, I do not. I feel healthier than I did before because I am more aware of what I put in my body now. I am more aware of my surroundings and what I do. So I'm more healthier than I was before then. I don't want to be who I was before the disease. I am grateful to be the person that I am right now. I am able to overcome anything. My faith is stronger in God, and I'm just happy.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, and awesome to hear that you've come so far along. So it sounds like you're either really close or potentially heading towards remission then.
I believe so. And a lot of people that I talked to in the Facebook group, they were mentioning if you no longer have symptoms, then you're in remission. I haven't had any symptoms in roughly maybe 5 or 6 months. So I believe I'm pretty close to remission. I will give it a year. I'm going to wait till the end of the year to see if I have any setbacks, but I'm very positive, very optimistic about the future, and I'm just going to continue to make sure that I'm taking all my probiotics, keeping my gut health in check. And I still take some of my herbs for maintenance. Not if I'm feeling bad, but just for maintenance purposes. I'll take my herbs maybe twice a week just for maintenance, but not when I'm feeling bad.
Okay, so you do a little bit of maintenance here and there. I hear that's pretty
Yeah.
common. Some people have in their purse like a Berber panella or like even some Mento, some other antimicrobial type drops. And so I hear every now and then they just have it and they take the little bits. Yeah, so I hear that's pretty common too.
Just for maintenance purposes. I'm going to do that until the end of the year and see if I
Yeah.
have more symptoms. And if I'm feeling better by the end of the year, then I'm just going to maybe try to put it to the side, try to put it to the back of the medicine cabinet and just move forward.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fair enough. And is there anything, if you were kind of going back to your treatments or even to the start of when you were bitten by the tick, is there anything that you would change or would you leave it as is?
Ooh, that is a great question. If I would change anything, I don't think I would be the woman that I am today. Um, I've grown a lot. There were a lot of people in my life that were not supposed to be in my life. I realized who my true friends are. I realized where my support comes from, and that's from my parents. Even though they don't understand the disease, they still try to understand how I feel, and they've been there since day one. During this time on my journey, I've done a lot of reading. I spent a lot of time to myself. Self-care has been very important for me, and self-love. Pouring into myself. I wasn't doing that before. I was always pouring into other people. I was always busy. I was always busy with my job, busy with school, being very social, being out and about. Now I'm more putting all of that energy into myself. And I don't think I would change anything. I appreciate the journey. It was a long journey. I feel as though it was needed for me to be where I am today.
Yeah. That's so interesting to hear that answer, that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily change it because of what it's the transformation and person you become because of it.
Exactly. Wouldn't change
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Very interesting to hear for sure.
So give us some more detail on that. We're at the transformation part of the podcast, and you teased a little bit about your relationship with God. So talk to us about how this has been transformation for you physically. You did share with Lacey that you are very, very different in the way that you are, I'm assuming, eating, the way you're moving, the way you're defining your social relationships, and now, of course, your place in the world, right? So our identity is very clearly defined by most of the experts. Dr. Maya Shankar, for example, I think is the leading expert on identity. She defines identity as finding your place in the world, right? So talk to us about how this journey has helped you to find your place in the world, and how finding your place in the world has allowed you to be more purposeful and to serve in the way that God created you to serve.
Yeah, sure. So when I first got the disease, I questioned God. I didn't realize why I was being punished. I went to church every Sunday. I was a good person, even though I felt I was a good person. I did right by people. I grew up in a church, very traditional, grew up in a Baptist church. So I questioned God. My faith was tested for the past 2 or 3 years. What I've learned is that everything is a process. It could be worse. There were different stories that I read on Facebook. There were people that were in the same situation I am that had worse experiences. So my faith was tested. I battled mentally with myself, depression. I turned away from God, basically. So I had to really dig deep down inside and just realize where my health came from, which was God. So I started going back to church. It was the end of actually 2022 when I started going back to church, just putting my faith in God and just praying more. When I would have those days where I didn't have anybody to talk to, I would just pray. And I did a lot of reading of my Bible, just being more positive. I realized that just having a positive outlook on it just made me feel better. If I felt negative and bad about it, I was always feel bad, and I didn't want to feel that way. So I just turned my mindset to a more open and positive mindset so that I could feel better. And I just accepted it. I was like, this is a test. This is what God has given me to test my faith. And am I going to fail it or am I going to pass it? So that journey has really tested my faith, and my faith is stronger in God. My love for myself, my love for my family, and just knowing that life is short and I enjoy every day. I realize that we don't know if we're going to be here the next day. So I'm more positive. Before then, I would have my negative days. I would just be like, you know what, is what it is. I would soap all day, just sitting in the house, having bad days. But I realized that, like I mentioned, it could get worse. And this journey has been very good for me. Every day is a journey, and I just appreciate my process that I've had. I take each day one step at a time. Any battle that I face now is like, oh, that's nothing. I had Lyme disease. Come on now. I battle Lyme disease. That's nothing. That's a small feat. So I appreciate the journey, the most definitely.
All right. So now, one of the things that's very clear about our relationship with God is that we have to define what piece of God's creativity is in us and how we were created to serve others, right? Your job is to serve others. So as you began to regain your relationship with God, and as you began to worship in this traditional setting, how did that help you to define what piece of God's creativity was in you? And how did that help you to find what he created you to serve, or how he created you to serve?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say just having that servant type of personality, being there for other people. I've always been a go-to person. So having people to come to me, people that know what I've been through, are able to come to me with their stories. And I'm able to, of course, give them that assistance. Like, hey, things will be better, give them a Bible verse. I've invited more of my friends to church to go to with me as well, because they realize, my faith in God and everything that I went through. So I have more of my friends now that are leaning towards me for help. And because they've seen how strong my faith is. So having that servant type of personality, and I incorporate that in my work as well, with the servant leadership, being able to serve others. Not looking down on others, but being there for other people, not feeling as though I'm better than anyone else. We're all here. We're all human, just being there for people. And that's what I've been doing.
So talk to us about the professional shift you made, because you were working at a particular place. You
Mhm.
went to get your graduate education so that you would get promoted in that particular place, and it didn't work out for you. And as you completed your education and as you began your Lyme disease journey, that's when you ultimately had this professional shift as well. So talk to us about how that set of experiences were not coincidental, but were designed by God to put you in the place where you were supposed to be, and to put you in a place where you can now serve through your work where you're supposed to be serving.
Yeah, sure. So with my previous job, when I was working with the city, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I was always out and about doing town hall meetings, doing workshops, being in front of people, face-to-face meetings every day, all day. So my new role as a contract specialist, I have a lot of time to sit down and work one-on-one with just one contractor. It gives me enough time to build a better relationship with those business owners, compared to being bogged down with 20, 30, 40 plus calls a day. So I went from having a stressful work environment to having a more laid back work environment, being able to work with one contractor for months and months, compared to working with 20, 30, and 50 people and being just, overwhelmed and stressed out by the end of the day. Just being able to just have a more laid back atmosphere where I'm able to just be myself, when I'm able to relax, where I'm able to build more meaningful relationships in my career.
And what about the type of work? Meaning, what kind of work were you doing for the city versus what type of work are you now doing for the Army Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, sure. So with the city, I was a small business professional. Basically, I was responsible for making sure those small businesses were certified so they're able to do business with the city, which means that I had to speak to a lot of these businesses. They were coming to me, they had to do applications to verify that they were capable of doing business with city government. With my new role, all of these businesses are already certified. So I don't have to go through any of that process to make sure they're certified. They're already ready to do business. They're ready to sign contracts. So my new role is basically on the back end compared to being on the front end of the contract process. I'm now on the back end where everyone is stable, everyone is ready to do business. They're just ready to sign contracts, which makes my workday very easy and very less stressful.
Right. And so, and you're doing the downstream work that's allowing the work to be completed, as opposed to determining whether or not some folks are qualified to do the work.
Exactly.
Because in the end, government has to perform a service and has to provide a service. And you're in a place where you're now in direct contact with the people who are providing the service and making sure they're providing the service that is necessary to be done.
Exactly. That's correct.
So now we're coming to the end of the podcast, and this has really been a beautiful podcast. And you've been very kind to share your beautiful story with us. But we're going to ask you one more question and ask you to help folks in one more way. So if you were to give us the top 3 low cost or no cost treatment options you'd recommend to a new person on the Lyme disease journey, what would they be?
Saunas, lemon water, and Burba Panella, which you can actually get on Amazon for no more than, I think, roughly like $30 or $40.
Okay. So let's talk about each one of these 3, because it sounds like you're a detox gal, right? So let's talk about saunas. And we do understand that there are some people that are going to be heat sensitive during different
Right.
elements of their journey. So for example, Matt, my traditional co-host, was not able to use sauna because he was heat sensitive. But for those folks
Right.
who are not heat sensitive, talk to us about saunas and talk to us about how that was helpful to you in the detox element of your journey.
Yeah, sure. So, I wasn't really very fond of the sauna beginning. I had to actually work myself up to sitting there for 25 minutes, which is my max still. So I would, beginning just go for 5 minutes in my journey. I would just sit there for 5 minutes. Okay, this is all I could do. Make sure drink a lot of water and a lot of electrolytes, which I wasn't aware of when I first started. And every 2 or 3 months, I would try to increase my minutes by at least 5. So I'm actually at the point where I can do 25 minutes, which is really good because the sauna can be very draining because you're sweating a lot. You're losing a lot of that sweat, but you have to make sure that you're replenishing it with a lot of electrolytes as well, which I wasn't aware of when I first started. So drink a lot of water and a lot of electrolytes and just work yourself up to sitting there for, if you want to sit there for 30, 40, 45 minutes to an hour, like some people. But don't try it the first time. Just sit there for an hour in the first go, like I
Okay.
did. Just do 5 minutes at a time and go from there.
So slow and steady is your advice.
Exactly.
And did you have a particular temperature for the sauna that you were using? And do you have any recommendations about what temperature the sauna should be for the detox protocol?
I didn't have a set temperature. I would go to the gym and basically whatever temperature was set in there, this is what I would actually go and just sit in. I didn't have a set temperature where I would actually set it. So I would just go in at any temperature and just sit there.
Okay, so let's talk about lemon water.
Yes.
You did reference that as a lifesaver during the course of the podcast.
Yes.
So I'm glad you came back to that. Talk to us about lemon water, how you used it, and were you using it as an additional detox tool?
Yes, I use lemon water for inflammation as well as detoxing. Some days, actually, when I do feel inflammation in my body, I still drink lemon water. And I actually add baking soda to it as well, just small baking soda to it for my inflammation. But drinking a lot of lemon water helped me with detoxing. If I felt bad after taking my herbs or antibiotics, if I felt as though my body was inflamed, I would just get lemon and get some distilled water and just drink a lot of that throughout the day. I would have a tall jug of water I would take to work every day. And I still do that today with my lemon and water and just drink that throughout the day to just detox and get all those toxins out.
All right, and now let's talk about your other go-to. I mean, you mentioned this several times during the podcast, the Berber Talk to us about that and how that helped you either with detox or inflammation or all of the above.
Yeah, so it's the same with helping with my detox and inflammation, Burropanella. I ordered it online through the same site that I ordered my herbs through Byron White Formulas. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Byron White, but he does formulas for Lyme disease. And he also had the Burropanella online as well. So I ordered it from there for my herxing symptoms. And I realized that it was a miracle saver for me. Anytime I feel bad, I would get just some distilled water, put roughly, you can put, I think it's up to 25 drops, but the most I put in there is worth like 10 drops in a distilled water and just drink that. And if you don't feel good after, I think 30 minutes, you can do more, which is what I do as well when I'm feeling bad. So that's like my number one go-to when I feel terrible, when I need to detox, when I'm having those herc symptoms, I go straight to my Burropanella.
All right, so it is really important that we have a very well-defined detox protocol because one of the reasons why our immune system is often overwhelmed is because we have so many toxins in our body that the immune system is not able to kill off or manage the bugs that are in our system. So
Exactly.
so your all three of your go-to protocols are detox protocols of sauna, lemon water, and Burropanella. So I
Yes.
appreciate your three low cost to no cost treatment options, and we will make sure we get them in the book. So Tabitha Veazey, thank you very much for sharing your story with our community, and thank you for contributing to the Lyme quilt here at Tick Boot Camp.
Thank you both for
Yeah.
having me.
Thank you, Tabitha. I appreciate it.
Thank you both for having me and listening. Thank you.